Everything began the moment I received that terrible call. They told me my husband was in critical condition, and I rushed to the hospital in a panic. When I reached the surgery wing, a nurse stopped me before I could enter. "Hide, please. Trust me," she whispered urgently. I didn't know why, but I obeyed and slipped into an empty room. 10 minutes later, I saw something through the cracked door that froze me to the core. That night it poured endlessly as if the sky were crying with me. But before I continue, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. It means a lot to us to know how far our stories reach. The clock in Sarah's apartment had just struck midnight. Dressed in her pajamas, she paced back and forth in the living room, unable to calm herself. She kept checking her phone, waiting for a call or a message, but the screen stayed dark. Her husband, Michael, still hadn't come home. Even though it wasn't unusual for him to work late as the director of Valley Construction, tonight Sarah felt a different kind of anxiety. A cold pressure in her chest that refused to leave her in peace. They had argued a little earlier that afternoon. Nothing serious, just money. Sarah had suggested that Michael try to control his spending, but he grew irritated and told her she didn't understand the pressure he was under at the construction site. Normally, if he was running late, Michael would text, "Still working," or, "Traffic is crazy in Chicago." But this time nothing. Sarah called him 3 times. The first rang without answer and the other 2 went straight to voicemail. His phone probably died, she told herself, trying to stay calm, but the uneasy feeling grew stronger as the rain slammed against the windows. Sarah looked out at the wet, empty street. A shiver ran through her and she hugged herself. She remembered her mother-in-law, who always got overly worried whenever Michael was late. She was grateful the woman didn't live with them in their apartment in the Loop, because her nerves would have made everything worse. Suddenly, at 12:30, the house phone rang, breaking the silence of the night and making Sarah jump. They almost never used that landline. With trembling hands, Sarah answered. "Hello." Her voice barely came out. "Am I speaking with Sarah, wife of Michael?" A cold, serious voice asked on the other end. "Yes, that's me. Did something happen to my husband?" she asked, gripping the receiver tightly. "Ma'am, please stay calm. Your husband was in a serious accident on the I-90 highway. An ambulance brought him to Chicago Metropolitan Hospital. His condition is critical and they are operating on him right now." The world collapsed around her. The words "critical" and "surgery" echoed in her mind. The voice continued, telling her that Dr. Richard Vance was in charge of the operation and that she needed to come immediately. Hearing that name brought a small sliver of relief. Dr. Vance had always been the family's trusted physician, someone Michael respected deeply. "I'm on my way," she said and hung up. For a few seconds she couldn't move. Her legs wouldn't respond. She couldn't believe Michael, the man who always seemed invincible, was fighting for his life. Suddenly, adrenaline kicked in. She grabbed her coat, her keys, and her purse and ran out just as she was, still in her pajamas. She took the elevator down, feeling an enormous emptiness in her stomach. When she stepped outside, the cold rain hit her face. She ran to her car in the parking lot, struggling to get the key into the lock because her hands were shaking. She started the engine and sped off without waiting for it to warm up. The drive to Chicago Metropolitan Hospital usually took half an hour, but with the rain and her panic, it felt endless. Sarah drove fast, tears blurring her vision while the wipers failed to keep up. Memories kept flashing in her mind. Michael laughing last week and Michael angry that afternoon. Guilt swallowed her. What if that argument about money was the last thing we ever said to each other? "Dear God, please save him," she repeated like a desperate prayer. She ran red lights and passed cars without caring. She just needed to get there and pray it was all a mistake. Finally, she saw the massive white hospital building. She left the car badly parked at the emergency entrance, ignoring the guard shouting after her, and ran inside, drenched and breathless. "My husband, Michael. Car accident," she yelled at the receptionist. The woman checked her computer. "Yes, he was taken to the 4th floor, the operating area. Take the elevator and turn left. Operating room 3. Sarah didn't wait for the elevator. She ran up the emergency stairs. She reached the 4th floor with her heart pounding painfully. The hallway was silent, filled with that strong smell of disinfectant she hated. At the end she saw the double doors with a red light glowing above them. Operating room 3, in surgery. Michael was in there. She ran toward the doors, ready to push them open. She needed to see him. But just as she reached them, someone grabbed her arm firmly. "Don't go in," a voice said. Sarah turned, startled, and saw a young nurse, pale, terrified. Her badge read, "Emily, nurse." "You're Michael's wife, right?" the girl whispered quickly. "Yes, my husband is in there. I need to go in." "Let me go." "No." Emily held her tighter, pulling her away from the door. "You can't go in. They must not know you're here. It's very important." Sarah stared at her, confused, unable to understand what was happening, but the terror in the nurse's eyes froze her in place. "What are you talking about? Who are they?" "My husband is dying." "Please listen, ma'am." Emily interrupted, her eyes desperate. "I know this will sound insane, but this is not a life-saving operation. It's a trap." That last word turned Sarah to stone. A trap? What did that even mean? "But Dr. Richard Vance is in there," she whispered. "That is exactly the problem," Emily hissed urgently. "We don't have time for explanations. You need to hide right now." Emily pulled Sarah by the arm, the woman still completely stunned. She pointed to a dark wooden door on the other side of the hallway, half hidden behind a vending machine. The door had no sign. It looked like a storage room or a staff closet. "Go in there," she ordered. "It's a staff locker room that's hardly used at night. Lock the door from the inside. No matter what you hear, do not make a sound and do not come out until I return for you. No matter what happens, stay inside." Sarah's head was spinning. None of it made sense. A nurse was telling her to hide from her own husband's surgery and calling it a trap. But the absolute terror in Emily's eyes was too real to ignore. This wasn't an act. Something was terribly wrong in that hospital behind those steel doors. "Why should I trust you?" Sarah whispered, her voice shaking between fear and anger. "Because I'm the only person who saw your husband's real medical file before Dr. Richard Vance altered it," Emily replied quickly. "He's not in critical condition because of the accident. Hurry. Someone could come out any second." That last sentence did it. Emily practically pushed Sarah across the hallway. With her mind in chaos, Sarah obeyed and opened the door to the locker room. The room was dark and smelled stale, a mix of old coffee and sweat. Emily pushed her inside. "Lock the door and trust me," she whispered once more before closing it silently from the outside. Sarah heard the soft click of the lock. She was alone in complete darkness. Feeling her way along the door, she found the latch and turned it. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. She could barely breathe. She leaned against the door, trying to process what had just happened. Hide, trap, false medical file, Dr. Richard Vance. Sarah slid down onto the cold floor. The only light came from a thin line shining beneath the door. She could make out the silhouettes of metal lockers around her. She hugged her knees, trying to stop the violent tremors shaking her body. What was happening? Was this nurse Emily insane, or had she just saved her life? Her thoughts darted back to Michael. If he wasn't in critical condition, where was he? What were they doing to him in that operating room? Sarah crawled quietly toward the door and pressed her ear against it. Silence. The hallway outside was deserted. She heard nothing but her own thunderous heartbeat. Peeking through the keyhole, she could only see the wall across the hallway. She checked her phone. 1 a.m. Time crawled. Each second felt like an hour. She sat alone in the darkness, listening to an eerie silence. Her mind filled with the worst possibilities. What if Emily had locked her in on purpose? What if Michael truly needed her? But she had no choice but to trust her instincts, and her instincts told her Emily's fear had been genuine. She waited a minute. Then she sharpened her hearing, trying to catch even the faintest sound. Distant footsteps at the far end of the hallway, the hum of an ice machine, but nothing from operating room 3. 5 minutes. He felt like she was suffocating. The room was stifling. He wanted to scream. He wanted to burst out and tear down those operating room doors. 7 minutes. She prayed silently, not only for Michael but also for herself. He felt like a trapped animal. 10 minutes. The longest 10 minutes of her life. Suddenly she heard a clear click from outside, not at her door but in the hallway. Sarah held her breath and pressed her eye to the keyhole, but the angle was wrong. She shifted, searching for any gap. Through the thin space between the door and the frame, she noticed that the red light above operating room 3 had turned off. The operation was over. Then Sarah heard a soft hiss. The steel doors of the operating room were opening. In the stillness of that sterile hallway, the sound was like ice cracking in a glacier. Holding her breath, every muscle tense, Sarah stared through the narrow sliver of space, her only window into a world that had just turned upside down. The first silhouette to appear was Dr. Richard Vance. He still wore his blue surgical uniform, but his mask was pulled down to his neck. He did not look like a doctor who had just fought to save a critical patient. He wasn't tired, stressed, or sad. He looked relaxed, moving with calm ease. He peeled off rubber gloves stained with what Sarah now knew was fake blood. A wave of nausea hit her. Then a second silhouette appeared. Sarah expected a gurney. She expected to see a helpless body covered with a sheet. She expected the beeping of a heart monitor. But what she saw froze her blood. It was Michael. Her husband. He wasn't lying down. He wasn't being pushed on a stretcher. Michael was walking. He stepped out of the operating room on his own feet. He too wore a blue surgical uniform, as if he were part of the medical team, not the patient. He stretched, cracking his neck from side to side as though he had simply been sitting too long. He was healthy, strong, completely uninjured. Sarah covered her mouth with both hands. A strangled sob nearly escaped her throat. This was impossible. It had to be a hallucination, shock, panic, something. And then a third person emerged. A woman. Tall, slim, with long blonde hair, and beneath her doctor's coat she wore an elegant evening dress. Sarah recognized her instantly. Jessica, Michael's personal assistant. The same woman who always looked at her with disdain at Valley construction events. Michael had always told Sarah her jealousy was unfounded. But Sarah hadn't been blind, only naive. The plan worked perfectly. Michael's voice echoed clearly in the silent hallway, deep, calm, without the slightest trace of pain. Sarah felt as if someone had punched her in the stomach. Dr. Richard Vance let out a low chuckle as he tossed the gloves into a biohazard container. Of course it worked. The ER staff is on my side. The fake accident report is already in the system. The fake ambulance did its job. Officially, at this moment, Michael has suffered a severe internal hemorrhage. I can't wait to see Sarah's face, Jessica said, her voice hissing like a snake. She handed Michael a bottle of water. She's probably already on her way. Crying like crazy, full of panic. Poor idiot. Michael laughed, the same laugh that once comforted Sarah but now sounded demonic. She'll be completely destroyed. She's so stupid. Sarah bit into the palm of her hand. The physical pain was nothing compared to the agony in her chest. Not only had they betrayed her, they were mocking her. She had become the punchline of their sick plan. The important thing is that when she arrives, Dr. Richard Vance said, shifting to a serious tone, we need to play our roles, Michael. You have to go to the recovery room. Quickly, lie down. We'll hook you up to N4 and the monitors. You need to look weak but stable. Post-op condition. I know, Michael groaned, rolling his eyes. I'm weak, but thanks to this great doctor I've survived. I'll meet Sarah in the waiting room, Dr. Richard Vance continued. I'll give her the good news and the bad news. The surgery was a success. The hemorrhage has stopped. But... He paused dramatically. But... Jessica asked, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. But, Dr. Richard Vance said, a slight smile forming, I'll tell her that during the operation we found something else. A very dangerous blood clot near the liver. I'll tell her I need her signature for a second procedure tomorrow morning, Dr. Richard Vance explained. An urgent, high-risk surgical washout. Of course, Michael added with a malicious smile. Exactly, the doctor nodded. A procedure with a very high risk of complications during anesthesia. If something were to happen to her on the operating table, Michael said, it would be a shame, but we would have done everything we could. In that moment, Sarah finally understood. Everything clicked into place. The target wasn't Michael. The accident wasn't real. Everything was staged, a trap designed specifically for her. Her mind flashed back to what had happened 3 weeks earlier. Michael had come home with a stack of papers for a new life insurance policy worth several $1,000,000. Sarah had asked why they needed a new one. He told her it was to secure their retirement, their future. She remembered joking, "Why am I the insured one? You're the one with the dangerous job." Michael just laughed and said, "It's part of an investment package, honey, just sign." And Sarah, trusting as always, signed. She had signed her own death sentence. The argument that afternoon hadn't really been about everyday expenses. Sarah had complained that the premium for the new insurance policy was too expensive and asked Michael to cancel it. No wonder he had been so angry. Without knowing it, Sarah was ruining his murder plan. And when she doesn't wake up from the operating table, Michael's voice pulled her out of her thoughts. The insurance payout is millions of dollars. We can leave this country and start a new life in Switzerland. Jessica laughed and wrapped herself around Michael's arm. I already booked the tickets to Zurich. All 3 of them, her husband, his lover, and the family doctor. The 3 of them had planned her murder in the place that was supposed to be the safest in the world. A hospital. Sarah's blood was no longer cold. It began to boil. The fear that had paralyzed her slowly hardened into something else. Something cold, sharp, and merciless. She watched the 3 of them walk calmly down the hallway, turning their backs to the operating room. They probably rounded the corner to take the elevator to the recovery area. Their footsteps faded and the hallway fell silent again. Sarah leaned against the door, her body shaking violently, but no longer from fear. She shook with pure rage. She was trapped alone in a dark, suffocating locker room while her would-be killers waited on the same floor for her to fall into their trap. She had to get out. But how? Suddenly she heard a sound at her door, not in the hallway. A soft click. Someone was inserting a key from the outside. Sarah froze. Her heart stopped. Did they know she was there? Had Jessica, Michael, and Dr. Richard Vance realized someone had been listening? Had they come back for her? The doorknob turned slowly. The door opened with a faint creak. A beam of light from the hallway pierced the darkness, blinding Sarah. A small figure in a blue uniform slipped inside. "Sarah," the person whispered. A wave of relief so powerful washed over Sarah that her knees nearly buckled. It was Emily. She quickly shut the door and locked it again from the inside. She leaned against the wood, panting. Under the dim light coming from beneath the door, her face was pale as a ghost. "Did you see them, ma'am?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. Sarah couldn't speak, she could only nod. Tears of rage and betrayal finally rolled down her cheeks. "Did you hear their conversation?" Emily insisted. Sarah nodded again. "Everything," she whispered hoarsely. "The insurance, the fake operation, the plan they have for me tomorrow." Emily closed her eyes for a moment as if feeling the pain with her. "By God. I suspected it. But hearing it. Why are you helping me?" Sarah asked, looking at the young nurse. "You're risking everything." Emily sat on the floor beside her and took a deep breath. "I've suspected Dr. Richard Vance for a long time," she said. "Ever since I was a beginner nurse working in the operating room administration." Sarah listened, gripping the nurse's arm as if it were the only anchor left in her shattered world. "He's not a doctor," Emily said quietly, staring at the lockers across the room. "He's a butcher. His specialty is accidents. In the operating room he targets wealthy patients with large life insurance policies, or elderly patients with no family. He schedules a simple surgery. Then during the operation there are complications. A fatal reaction to anesthesia, an unexpected hemorrhage. Something impossible to prove as malpractice. The patient dies. The insurance pays out, and somehow Dr. Vance always receives a generous donation for his research a few weeks later. He's despicable. But how did you know about Michael?" "About me?" Sarah asked. "I was on duty tonight on the surgery floor," Emily explained. I saw an emergency surgery scheduled under Michael's name. The code was closed abdominal trauma. But something was off. There was no supporting data from the ER. Normally, a patient's information flows automatically into the system. This one was blank. It was as if he had appeared out of nowhere right in front of the operating room. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. Out of curiosity, Emily continued, I used my access to check the system records. I saw that Dr. Vance had manually entered the data from his own computer. Extremely unusual for such a prestigious surgeon. So I did something reckless. I knew the access code to his office. An hour ago, while he was getting ready for surgery, I slipped inside. I had to know what he was hiding. Emily's eyes gleamed. In a locked drawer of his desk, I found the real file. Under Michael's name, it wasn't an accident report. It was the results of a full medical examination from 2 days ago. Perfect health. Absolutely perfect. Of course he was, Sarah thought bitterly. And in the same drawer, Emily whispered even more quietly, there was your file, ma'am. A copy of the new life insurance policy. The amount was astronomical, millions of dollars. And at the bottom, under the section for the consulting physician, was Dr. Richard Vance's name. Everything fit. The fake accident, the fake operation, and the plan for a second deadly surgery, your surgery. I knew I didn't have much time, the nurse said. I knew they would call you. I didn't know the exact plan, but I knew you couldn't meet them before learning the truth. I ran into the hallway hoping to intercept you, and luckily I did. Sarah squeezed the nurse's hand. You saved my life, Emily. Not yet, Emily said seriously. We're just getting started. They know you're coming. They're waiting for you. What am I supposed to do? Sarah asked as panic crept back into her chest. I can't act. I can't look Michael in the face and pretend I'm sad. You have to, Emily said firmly. You need to play your role just like they're playing theirs. Right now they've moved Michael to the recovery room at the end of this hallway. They'll call you any minute. You have to pretend you're devastated, heartbroken, relieved he survived. Cry if you need to. Her instructions were quick and precise. When they give you the papers for tomorrow's surgery, you must refuse. If I refuse, they'll suspect something. Don't refuse outright. Say you're in shock, that you need time to think, that you need to call your mother-in-law first. Anything. The important thing is, do not sign anything tonight. We need time. Time for what? Sarah asked. To get physical evidence, Emily said. We can't run, they would chase us. And we can't go to the police with just our story. They'll say you're a hysterical woman. We need irrefutable proof. What proof? First, the real health report for Michael that I saw in Dr. Vance's office. Second, the file of Michael's fake surgery in the system. And third, the security camera footage. Sarah's eyes widened. Security cameras? Yes. I'm sure Michael didn't arrive at this hospital in an ambulance, Emily said. He came on his own. Most likely he parked in the staff underground lot, the one farther away. If we can get the security footage from tonight, him walking calmly into the hospital, we destroy his entire accident alibi. The office of Dr. Richard Vance is in the basement, Sarah said, her mind finally starting to work. Correct. Right next to the records room and the camera server room, Emily confirmed. His lair. The nurse pulled a white card from her pocket. It's a spare master access card. I grabbed it from the reception desk earlier, but there's a problem. The basement hallway is monitored by cameras, and Dr. Vance often watches them himself from his computer. Sarah stared at the card in Emily's hand. It felt as heavy as lead. I'll create a distraction, Emily said. I'm going to trigger the fire alarm on an upper floor. That will keep all the security guards busy. Will that give me enough time? Sarah asked, her heart pounding. You'll need to sneak down to the basement, Emily said, looking her directly in the eyes. Go into Dr. Vance's office and find the real file on Michael. Then go to the server room. Get the recordings from the last few hours. If you have a data cable, you can transfer them to your phone. Sarah checked the pockets of her pajamas. She had her phone but no cable. Use this, Emily said, unhooking a small USB drive from her keychain. Plug it into the server and copy the data. Quickly. Emily, I don't know how to do that. You can do it. Emily snapped. You have to. It's our only chance. Afterward, meet me at the basement emergency exit. We'll leave together. Emily had just given her an impossible mission. Walk straight into the wolf's den and steal evidence while her killers roamed freely upstairs. At that moment, Sarah's phone vibrated in her hand. The name on the screen made her blood boil. Dr. Richard Vance. They've started, Emily whispered, her eyes wide. Answer. Play your role, weak, hysterical, submissive. The suffocating air of the locker room pressed against her lungs. The phone vibrated in her hand like a furious snake. This was her stage. Time to act. Sarah inhaled deeply. She summoned every drop of pain and betrayal inside her and poured it into a trembling, frightened voice with a convincing sob as she swiped to answer. Yes, doctor. Sarah, thank God, Dr. Richard Vance's warm, compassionate voice replied, so full of false concern it made Sarah want to vomit. Where are you? We've been waiting for you. I need to speak with you. I just arrived. Michael, my husband, how is he, doctor? Sarah sobbed, her performance flawless. There was a calculated pause. He is a strong man, Sarah. The surgery was extremely difficult. We almost lost him. The hemorrhage was very severe. Sarah closed her eyes, imagining Michael walking out of the operating room, healthy and unharmed. My team and I managed to stop the bleeding. He's still very weak, but he's past the worst. He's in the recovery room, near the surgical area on the 4th floor. Oh, thank God. Thank you, Sarah cried again, this time pretending to feel relief. You may see him now, but there is another matter we must discuss immediately for the next steps. Dr. Vance's tone grew serious. Meet me in recovery room 2. Yes, doctor. I'm on my way, Sarah said. She hung up and looked at Emily with a hardened expression. It's time, Sarah said. Remember, Emily said, gripping her shoulders. They'll give you the papers. Do not sign anything. Make any excuse. Say you're in shock, you need to call your family, anything. Then leave. I'll handle the distraction. Take the service elevator at the end of the hallway near the emergency stairs. I'll wait for you at the basement exit. Bring the evidence. Sarah nodded. She opened the changing room door silently. The hallway was calm. She took a long breath and stepped out. She no longer moved like terrified Sarah. She moved like Sarah the hunter, though on the outside she appeared to be a devastated wife. She staggered deliberately down the hallway. She saw the door labeled Recovery Room 2. She pushed it open gently. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of the monitors beside the bed. And there they were, Dr. Richard Vance standing beside the bed with a folder in hand, and Jessica, the Viper, in the corner wearing an expression of fake concern. And on the bed lay Michael. Sarah almost let out a bitter laugh. His performance was impeccable. Michael's face was powdered to look pale. And likely nothing more than saline, was attached to the back of his hand. A heart monitor next to him emitted a steady, convincing beep, beep, beep. Michael's eyes were closed. His chest rose and fell in a carefully controlled rhythm to make him look weak. Michael! Oh, my love! Sarah rushed to the bedside and began to sob hysterically. She took his hand. It was warm and strong, not the hand of a man who had barely survived surgery. She had to use every ounce of willpower not to crush his fingers. Doctor, he looks so pale, Sarah said, turning to Dr. Richard Vance with tears shining falsely in her eyes. The doctor patted her shoulder. He's lost a lot of blood, ma'am, but he will recover. As I said, he's strong, thank God. But, Dr. Vance said the word Sarah had been waiting for, there is a problem. Sarah lifted her face with a frightened expression. What problem, doctor? While we were operating to stop the hemorrhage, the doctor explained patiently as if talking to a child, we found something unexpected. A rather large blood clot near the liver. It's not related to the accident, but it's extremely dangerous. It could rupture at any moment. Sarah looked at him with trembling lips. You mean? We need to remove it immediately, Dr. Vance said firmly. I've already scheduled a second emergency surgery for tomorrow at 9 in the morning. A cleaning procedure. In the corner, Jessica fought back a smile. Another operation, Sarah whispered. It's for his safety. But Dr. Vance turned a page in his folder. The procedure is very risky. It's a delicate area. There's a high chance of complications with anesthesia and internal bleeding. I need your consent. He handed her the folder. Inside was a form titled Consent for High-Risk Surgery, and below it a blank line waiting for her signature. The signature that would seal her own death. Whether the form was meant to be switched to her name later, or whether it was simply a pretext to put her on the table next, it didn't matter. It was the trap. Suddenly Michael's eyes cracked open slightly. Sarah whispered weakly like a bad actress. Sign it, honey. I trust Dr. Vance. Jessica stepped forward. Sarah, Michael needs this. Please don't hesitate. It's for him. They closed in around her, 3 wolves circling a lamb. Sarah looked at the pen in the doctor's hand, then at Michael's fake pale face, then at Jessica's cynical smile. Sarah began trembling violently, this time partly for real. I can't. Sarah, this is urgent, Dr. Vance pressed and his smile started to fade. I can't. Sarah cried, shoving the folder away. I feel dizzy. I'm nauseous. Another high-risk surgery? I have to call my mother-in-law, Michael's mother. I can't decide this alone. She faked a choking sob. I need some air. I need the bathroom. Before Dr. Vance or Jessica could react, Sarah ran out of the room. She heard the doctor shout after her. Sarah, wait. But she didn't stop. She sprinted down the hallway around the corner, past the nurse's station. She didn't head for the nearest bathroom. She ran toward the end of the hallway, exactly where Emily had told her to go. Just as she reached the last corner, a deafening fire alarm blared through the entire building. The sound came from an upper floor. Nurses rushed out of rooms, confused. A security guard sprinted to the main elevators, shouting into his radio. It was Emily's distraction. Amid the chaos, no one paid attention to Sarah. She spotted a metal door labeled, Service Elevator, Staff Only. She slid the card Emily had given her and the door clicked open. Sarah stepped into the narrow metal cabin that smelled of oil. She pressed the button for the basement. The elevator doors closed, sealing out the chaotic alarm. Alone as she descended, Sarah leaned against the wall, her heart pounding like a drum. She had won the first round, but now she was going straight into the wolf's den. The service elevator stopped with a soft ding and the doors slid open. The sight before her was nothing like the bright, pristine surgical floor. The hospital basement was dark, cold, and damp. Thick pipes ran across the low ceiling, some dripping water onto the cracked concrete floor. The fire alarm from above echoed faintly through the metal. Sarah stepped out with Emily's access card clenched tightly in her hand. She was alone in a chilling silence. She followed the barely visible signs painted on the walls: records, maintenance, server room. At the end of the hallway in a slightly brighter area she saw them, 2 doors side by side. One read, Dr. Richard Vance, Chief of Surgery. The other was a heavy metal door labeled Server Room, Restricted Access. This was his lair. Sarah decided to go to the doctor's office first to retrieve Michael's medical report. She slid the access card. The heavy wooden door opened silently and she slipped inside. The office was surprisingly luxurious. Thick carpets, a massive mahogany desk, towering bookshelves. It smelled of expensive coffee and leather. The money earned from medical accidents must have been very good. Sarah rushed to the desk. The drawers were locked. Damn it, she thought. She didn't have time to pry them open. Her eyes moved to the bookshelves. Between thick medical texts were rows of file folders. She read the labels: Research Agenda, Patients. She pulled out the Patients folder. It wasn't there. She grabbed another, Special Projects, and there it was, a thin, unlabeled folder. She opened it and her heart lurched. Inside was Michael's medical checkup report dated 2 days earlier. At the bottom, a large red stamp read, Optimal physical condition. Right beside it was another, thicker folder. Sarah opened it. It contained financial records, a final notice from a bank and a bankruptcy request for a multimillion-dollar debt under Valley Construction, Michael's company. Here were both the physical evidence and the motive. Her hands trembled so violently she could barely open her phone's camera. She photographed every page. The checkup, the optimal stamp, the bank debts. Done. She put everything back exactly where it was. Now the cameras. She left the office, closing the door quietly behind her, and moved to the metal server room door. She slid the card. It opened. A blast of cold air and a loud hum greeted her. The room was filled with racks of servers, green and yellow lights blinking in the dimness. She spotted a stack of monitors and video recorders in the corner. She read the labels: lobby, 4th floor hallway, and finally, staff underground parking. Bingo. She pulled out the USB drive Emily had given her and inserted it into a recording unit. A progress bar appeared on the small screen. Copying. Sarah's heart pounded with every percent that climbed. 10%, 20%. She looked at the live feed of the parking lot. It was empty. 30%, 40%. Please hurry. 50%, 60%. Suddenly she heard a noise, not inside the room but in the basement hallway. Footsteps. 2 people walking fast. Sarah's heart stopped. The fire alarm upstairs must have gone quiet. They were looking for her. 70%, 80%. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. She couldn't have gone far, she heard Dr. Richard Vance's voice say clearly. You check my office. I'll check the server room. Panic surged through Sarah. She looked at the progress bar. 95%, 98%. The doorknob began to turn. 99%. Copy complete. Sarah yanked out the USB. Just as the door opened, she spun around, bumping into a server rack behind her. Standing in the doorway was Dr. Vance, his eyes blazing with fury. Behind him, Jessica smiled triumphantly. Looking for me, Sarah? Jessica taunted in a sweet, deadly voice. It's been quite the game, Sarah, the doctor said, stepping into the room. He glanced at the recorder and then at the USB in Sarah's hand. Hiding in the locker room, faking a hysterical breakdown, running to the basement. Did you really think we were that stupid? And what about Emily? Sarah whispered. That little meddler? Dr. Vance laughed. We've taken care of her. She won't bother anyone again. Sarah's stomach twisted with terror. What had they done to Emily? Thought you were smart, huh? Jessica said, stepping forward to snatch Sarah's phone. She opened the photo gallery. Oh, our evidence. How cute. She deleted the photos one by one in front of Sarah's eyes. Michael, the money, all gone. But I have this. Sarah cried, lifting the USB. The footage of Michael walking in. You can't erase that. Dr. Vance smiled, the coldest smile Sarah had ever seen. Look more closely at what you copied. Sarah stared, confused. That recording you worked so hard to copy, the doctor explained as if lecturing a clueless student, is a loop from last night's footage, prepared for anyone curious enough to snoop. Sarah looked at the USB in her hand. It suddenly felt worthless. And the files in my office, Dr. Vance continued, were fake as well. That medical report was bait. The originals are already destroyed. It had all been a trap. Her escape from the recovery room, the basement mission. Everything had been orchestrated. They had let her run just to corner her here. Welcome to the trap, Sarah, the doctor said. Now you have 2 options. Sign the consent willingly. Jessica stepped forward and pulled from behind her back a large syringe filled with a clear liquid. Or we'll make you sign, she said. And afterward we can proceed with your second procedure. Right here. Right now. The cold server room suddenly felt suffocating. The walls seemed to close in on Sarah, trapping her with her 2 predators. The doctor's words slammed into her. The USB was fake. The photos were gone. Emily was neutralized. She was alone. Every step she'd thought was clever had been part of their plan. She had walked straight into the wolf's jaws. Jessica smiled with satisfaction and twirled the syringe in her hand. Come on, Sarah, she hissed. Choose. Sign willingly or we give you a little nap first. Dr. Richard Vance extended the folder toward her again. The signature line seemed to mock her. The game is over, ma'am. We have a schedule to keep. The fear was there, paralyzing her. But beneath it, Sarah's fury was igniting again. No longer a spark, but an inferno. They thought they had won, that she was submissive and stupid. They were very wrong. If the new evidence is fake, I'll have to use the old one, she thought. Sarah lifted her hands, pretending to tremble, and looked at the doctor with pleading eyes. I've lost. You win. The doctor allowed himself a small smile. A wise choice. I'll sign, Sarah said hoarsely. But please, let me make one quick call to my mother-in-law. I just want to hear her voice one last time. Jessica scoffed. Oh, how dramatic. No calls, the doctor said impatiently. Sign now. At least give me my phone back, Sarah said, pointing to the device in Jessica's hand. I just want to see a picture of my mother. Jessica rolled her eyes but glanced at the doctor. He nodded. Give it to her. She can't call anyone from this basement anyway. We blocked all signals. Of course they had. Jessica tossed the phone at Sarah's feet. Take it. Sarah bent down slowly, pretending to be defeated. She picked up the phone. Her hands trembled, this time from adrenaline. Thank you, she whispered. She straightened, and in an instant, everything about her changed. Her spine went rigid, her gaze turned cold and sharp. The doctor and Jessica felt it, the shift, and their smiles faltered. You're right, Sarah said flatly. It has been a good game. But you made one mistake. And what's that? Jessica mocked. You assumed I only discovered my husband's filth tonight, Sarah said as she unlocked her phone, but I've been smelling his filth for months. Jessica had deleted the photos, but she didn't know how to find an audio folder Sarah kept hidden. Before I sign, listen to this. Think of it as a lullaby. She pressed play. Michael's voice, clear and crisp, filled the room. I don't care about your gratitude. Just make sure the consulting fees are in the Swiss account by the end of the month. $2 million. Clean it. I don't want to know how. The recording was from 3 months ago. A call between Michael and a partner arranging bribes and money laundering. Sarah had recorded it secretly for a future divorce case. She never imagined she'd use it to save her life. Dr. Vance and Jessica froze. That has nothing to do with this, the doctor stammered. Oh, it has everything to do with this, Sarah said, stepping forward. This proves my husband is a criminal. This recording, combined with my testimony, will make the police dig into all his business dealings, including his insurance schemes with you. You won't leave this room alive, Jessica hissed, raising the syringe. Probably not, Sarah said defiantly. But this phone, she held it up, has been recording everything since you walked in. It was a lie. The signal was dead, but they didn't know that. And this recording is synced to the cloud. If my heart stops or I don't enter a password in 5 minutes, it sends automatically to my attorney, the national newspaper, and my mother-in-law. Terror flashed across Dr. Vance's face. Stop her, he shouted. Jessica, inject her now. Jessica screamed and lunged at Sarah with the syringe like a knife. Sarah stepped back, slamming into a rack of servers. There was nowhere to run. She raised her hands to shield herself. Stop. A furious voice boomed through the basement. The door burst open. Michael stood in the doorway, still wearing his surgical scrubs, his face flushed with rage. What the hell are you doing down here? He roared. The plan was in the recovery room, not in the basement. He stopped when he saw the scene. The panicked doctor, Jessica with the syringe, and Sarah holding her phone like a weapon. Michael's shock twisted into pure hatred. His wife knew everything. A deadlock. 3 predators staring at each other with distrust. And their prey standing in the center, holding the strongest card in the game. So you knew, Michael said in a dangerous voice. I knew everything, Michael, Sarah replied coldly. The fake surgery, the insurance, your plan to kill me tomorrow. Michael turned to Dr. Richard Vance. You said she wouldn't know anything. You said you handled the nurse. She tricked us, Dr. Vance stammered, pointing at Sarah. She faked hysteria. And she has an old recording of your business dealings. Michael's face hardened. What recording? Play it again, Sarah ordered herself. She needed to turn them against each other. She pressed play. Michael's voice, ordering the laundering of $2 million, filled the room again. Michael closed his eyes. He remembered that call. He knew exactly when it happened, but he had never imagined Sarah had recorded it. You, he hissed at her. So that was your plan. Trap me with that. That's just the beginning, Sarah said. He had to keep pushing. That only proves your character. But this, she lifted her phone, is proof of your crimes tonight. What are you talking about? Michael demanded. This phone, Sarah repeated her bluff, has recorded every word in this room. Dr. Vance's confession, Jessica's threats to inject me. And now you're here confirming the plan. Jessica and Dr. Vance stepped back, but Michael laughed. A dry, terrible laugh. Do you think I'm an idiot, Sarah? This is a basement. No signal, no cloud, no lawyers. Nothing has been sent anywhere. He stepped toward her menacingly. Whatever is on that phone will be destroyed here with you. Sarah's heart sank. She knew the bluff had failed. Michael knew her too well. Give me the phone, Michael ordered, hand outstretched. No, Sarah whispered. Give it to me. He lunged. Faster than she expected. His hand clamped around her wrist, twisting it brutally. Sarah screamed. The phone slipped from her fingers, skidding across the concrete floor. The screen cracked. Michael smirked and lifted his foot to crush it. The game's over, sweetheart. Too late. Stop. A new voice, loud and steady, echoed from the doorway. Everyone turned. In the entrance stood Emily, very much alive. Not neutralized. Standing tall, her face full of righteous fury. And she wasn't alone. Two large hospital security guards stood behind her, stone-faced. Michael's eyes widened. Dr. Vance stumbled backward. No, impossible. Did you really think I was that stupid, doctor? Emily said, stepping into the room. That I would send Sarah alone into your lair? What are you talking about? Dr. Vance stuttered. The fire alarm earlier, Emily explained, wasn't to distract the guards. It was to distract you. While you were busy chasing Sarah, these gentlemen and I went to the central control room. We disabled your fake server loop. We took over. She pointed at a security camera in the corner of the ceiling. Its tiny red light was blinking steadily. It's recording every word you've said in this room, Emily said. Every threat, every confession, recorded in real time by the head of hospital security. Michael, Dr. Vance, and Jessica stared at the camera in horror. They were trapped. Completely trapped. And that USB, Sarah added, pointing at the drive still on the recorder, that was the real bait, to keep you busy. While you were chasing me, Emily copied the real footage of your arrival, Sarah continued. You walking calmly through the staff lobby laughing with Jessica. We have everything. Silence. Only the hum of the servers filled the room. Michael's face turned ashen. His perfect plan had collapsed. Dr. Vance was the first to break. He knew his career, his life, was over. His eyes darted wildly until he spotted the syringe Jessica had dropped when Michael burst in. They won't catch me, he roared and lunged at Emily. He didn't go for Sarah. He went for the only person holding the technical evidence. Emily, look out. Sarah cried. But Emily didn't flinch. She had anticipated this. As the doctor charged, Emily stepped forward, pulling a small syringe from her uniform pocket. Much smaller, but just as lethal, she said calmly, plunging the needle straight into Dr. Vance's thick thigh. It's a strong sedative, maximum dose. You know the effects, don't you, doctor? Dr. Richard Vance froze, eyes wide with disbelief. He looked down at the syringe in his thigh and tried to pull it out, but his hands began to tremble. His legs buckled and he collapsed to the floor like a sack of potatoes, unconscious. Jessica screamed hysterically when she saw her accomplice fall. She completely lost control and tried to push past the guards to escape, but the second guard grabbed her easily and cuffed her wrists. Only Michael remained. He stood there staring, at the fallen doctor, at Jessica sobbing, and at Sarah, who watched him without fear. A blind fury overtook him. If he was going down, he would take Sarah with him. "This is all your fault," he roared. He forgot about the guards. He forgot about the camera. His eyes saw only Sarah. Michael lunged at her, hands outstretched to strangle her. The room exploded into chaos. "Sir, don't move," shouted the first guard, jumping in front of him. But Michael, driven by desperation, rammed his shoulder into the guard, knocking him off balance. In a fraction of a second, he broke through the defense. He reached Sarah and grabbed her by the collar, yanking violently. "I'm going to kill you," he snarled, his face inches from hers. But Sarah wasn't the same woman from 3 hours earlier. The fear was gone, replaced by survival instinct. She drove her knee upward with all her strength, striking Michael's thigh. He grunted in pain but didn't let go. He began shaking her violently. "Let her go," Emily shouted, rushing toward them. The guard recovered and grabbed Michael from behind, locking him in a powerful bear hug. "You're under arrest." Michael's feet lifted off the floor, but his grip on Sarah's clothes didn't loosen. She was dragged with him, nearly choking. "Get off me. She's mine." Michael screamed, kicking and thrashing. It was a wild, desperate move. His violent twist broke the guard's hold, but it also made Michael lose his own balance. He stumbled backward. His left foot caught on Dr. Vance's unconscious leg. Everyone saw it in slow motion. Michael falling, not to the ground but backward, straight into the heavy black metal server rack. His back hit first, but the momentum was too strong. His head snapped back violently. The back of his skull slammed into the sharp steel edge. It wasn't a dull thud. It was a gruesome crack, like a dry branch snapping. Silence fell instantly. Jessica stopped screaming. The guards froze. The humming of the servers suddenly sounded thunderous. Michael didn't slide to the floor. His body remained half-sitting, twisted unnaturally, head hanging at a wrong angle. His eyes were open, staring at Sarah, but something had changed. The rage had vanished, replaced by shock and dawning horror. "Michael," Sarah whispered, taking a step. The guard who had grabbed him moved cautiously closer. "Michael," he shouted to his partner. "Get an ambulance to the basement. Now." Michael opened his mouth, but only a raspy hiss came out. He tried to lift a hand, it didn't move. He tried to move his legs, they were still. Pure terror filled his eyes. I can't move. My legs, my hands. I can't feel anything," he whispered, his voice gravelly and broken. Sarah looked at her husband, the man who had tried to kill her seconds earlier, who had planned her death on an operating table, who had pretended to be paralyzed. Now the paralysis was real. "Oh my God," Emily breathed, covering her mouth. Sarah felt no pity, no triumph, only a cold emptiness. She stared into the eyes of the man now crying from genuine terror. The irony was brutal and perfect. Karma hadn't waited for a courtroom or a prison. It had struck right here in the cold server room, in the middle of his own evil scheme. "Don't touch him," the guard shouted as Sarah stepped closer. "Don't move his neck. Let the paramedics handle it." Sarah stopped, watching him, her dangerous, healthy husband now a real patient, far worse off than he had ever pretended to be. The doors opened again. The hospital's head of security entered, followed by 2 police officers. They stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. Jessica in handcuffs and sobbing. Dr. Vance unconscious on the floor. Michael broken against the server rack. And Sarah, clothes torn, standing tall. The game was over. Morning came slowly. Sarah sat in a break room, wrapped in a hospital blanket. Emily sat beside her, holding a cup of tea. Neither spoke. They had already told the police everything. The basement was now a crime scene. Once he regained consciousness, Dr. Vance was handcuffed to a hospital bed. Jessica was taken away in a patrol car before dawn, her hysterical screams echoing through the empty parking lot. And Michael was transported with extreme caution. Neck brace, spinal board, MRI, then straight to intensive care. The diagnosis arrived with the first rays of sunlight. A burst fracture of the fourth vertebra. His spinal cord was severed. He was quadriplegic, completely paralyzed from the neck down. He could breathe with difficulty and move his eyes, but nothing more. Forever. The following days were a blur for Sarah. She stayed at her parents' house and spoke only with her attorney. The news exploded across the media. The Red operating room scandal at the Chicago Metropolitan Hospital. Photos of the three criminals were everywhere. Justice came quickly. The video and audio recordings were undeniable evidence. Dr. Richard Vance faced the largest number of charges: conspiracy to commit murder, severe medical negligence, insurance fraud, and assault. Emily's testimony opened Pandora's box, revealing years of other suspicious surgical complications. Dr. Richard Vance was sentenced to life in prison, stripped of his medical license, and died in disgrace. As an accomplice, Jessica was also found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. Her pretty face streaked with tears in the courtroom did nothing to move the judge. She received a 20-year prison sentence. Emily was praised as a hero. After the hospital completely replaced its board of directors, she was offered a new position: Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer. She accepted, determined to ensure that no one like Dr. Vance would ever operate again. And Sarah filed for divorce the same day Michael was transferred out of intensive care. She attached evidence of the attempted murder and the old audio recording of the money laundering scheme. The court granted the divorce immediately in the defendant's absence. All assets were frozen. The life insurance policy was declared void. The multi-million-dollar debt Michael had created remained his responsibility, or rather the responsibility of the state-appointed administrator managing his seized property. Sarah was financially, legally, and emotionally free. A month later, she decided she needed to close this chapter forever. She visited Michael, and it would be the last time. He was no longer in a luxury hospital. He was now in a long-term care facility, run by the state for inmates with severe medical needs. His room was small and smelled of antiseptic and despair. He lay in a special bed, his head immobilized by supports. Only his eyes moved, staring at the ceiling. A nurse was changing his urine bag when Sarah entered. Michael's eyes darted toward the door. He saw her. Sarah wore a simple light blue dress. She looked calm and healthy. Michael's eyes narrowed. A powerless, burning hatred welled inside them. He tried to speak, but only a gurgling sound escaped his throat. He hated her. He blamed her for everything. Sarah walked slowly to the side of his bed. She stood there silently for a moment, looking at the man she once loved, the man who had betrayed her in the cruelest way. She felt no compassion, no anger, only closure. "I came to tell you one thing," Sarah said softly. Her voice was calm and clear in the quiet room. Michael stared at her, his bloodshot eyes fixed on hers. "You wanted to put me on an operating table, didn't you?" Sarah continued. "You wanted me helpless, dependent on machines so you could start a new life." Michael exhaled sharply. "Now," Sarah leaned a little closer, "you're the one trapped in a bed. You're the one who depends on others for everything. Forever. Isn't it ironic?" He straightened. "Enjoy the rest of your life, Michael." She walked down the hallway past the guards and out through the front doors of the facility. Outside, the sun was shining brightly. The morning air was crisp. Sarah inhaled deeply, feeling the warmth of the sunlight on her face. For the first time in a long time, she felt free. She descended the stairs and walked toward her car, toward the rest of her new life. What would you have done in Sarah's place? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming stories. See you in the next one.